Chapter 6. Stunned silence. Violetta grabbing my arm. I'm full of rage. Dan to the rescue. Look, he says, we don't know anything for certain yet. All we know is that we found a body and that he was shot. Nicholas could have been off on the more technical slopes with Inga for all we know. Yvette looks mortified. But, she says, but I heard you talking by the half-pipe. You both said that Nicholas was a terrible shot, and then Maddie yelled that she saw Nicholas in the woods when you were racing each other. I heard you, and I heard a man shooting, and that's when I crashed into the tree, when I was rushing to get away. Violetta looks as angry as I feel. No, she says, Nicholas would never hurt anyone. He doesn't even own a gun, so it can't be him. Actually, I say, feeling like I'm about to betray one of my best friends. He does. Inga left it for him, this morning, with the note about switching into biathlon. She told him to go out and practice with it before they meet. Violetta shakes her head. Here, says Eloise, handing Emilio's green tea to Violetta. Take this. I'll make a fresh one for Emilio. You look like you could use a pick-me-up. But Violetta refuses the tea, too focused on processing all the developments since her conversation with Nicholas last night, trying to get her head around why everybody knows more about her boyfriend than she does. I'm quick to come to Nicholas's defence. It's the least I can do in his absence. To be fair, I say, Nicholas barely has time to sleep right now, between work and training, and Miriam's turning up out of the blue like that. I doubt he's even had a chance to get his head around being switched to biathlon, and Inga turning out to be unreliable when he needs her the most. He probably doesn't even know about the boy being shot. Well, I hope you're right, says Violetta, still visibly shaken. Will you tell him I'm looking for him? If you see him, I want to make sure he's okay. I'm running a yoga class in a minute and I want to make sure Emilio knows what's going on, especially if it could be bad for his business. No need, says a familiar voice as the coffee shop door closes behind him. Theo. I've just spoken to Emilio on the phone. We just heard about the boy. It's shocking that something so awful would happen in a quaint and friendly resort like this. And right after all that business with Sophia killing Audrey too. I thought I was moving here for some peace and tranquility, not Murdersville. Send Nicholas my best, won't you, Violetta? If you see him before I do. Last thing he needs with the trials coming up. Violetta nods her head and bids us farewell. Hands are now filled with a 2-cup tray and a couple of cookies on the house in case she fancies them later. Eloise lets out a long sigh, eyes following Violetta as she leaves the coffee shop. This really sucks, says Eloise. I just feel so helpless. I hate seeing the people I care about suffer like this. She's quiet for a moment, processing something, or thinking up some sort of plan, only I've no idea what, because I've racked my brains trying to think of a way to help, and I've got nothing. If we leave this to Bastien, she says, it'll end in disaster. We all know what he's like. He'll pin this on Nicholas regardless of whether there's any evidence or not. There are mutterings, and we all nod in agreement. Theo leans against the counter and orders as usual, newspaper tucked under one arm, pen in the top pocket of his tweed jacket. I do have some news, he says, trying hard to lift the mood. I was just buying the paper across the way. Dr. Sim grabbed me, asked if I could translate for him. Typical Bastien. Made no effort at all to understand him. Said he'd have to come down to the station, but Sim's due in theatre. Anyway, point is, and I don't know whether I should be telling you this or not, but since it's probably supposed to be kept confidential, it turns out William's alive. William? Asked Eloise. I turned to look at her. William, that's the boy's name. The lifty, the one who got shot. I haven't told you that, have I? Eloise still looks confused, but I'm already looking at Theo as I speak. It's okay, I say. I was just at the hospital earlier. Bastien wanted me to translate for Dr. Sim, so I don't think it's a big secret or anything. But yeah, he's alive. I was there when he woke up. Bastien said to hang around, so he'd have a friendly face to wake up to, and that's when I found out his name. But that's great news, says Dan, that he's alive. And if he's alive, then I expect he saw a shooter, so he'll be able to tell Bastien that it wasn't Nicholas, right? Theo and I both shake our heads at the same time. Unfortunately, says Theo, Dr. Sim said it was a hopeless case. Eloise places Theo's drink on the counter and grabs him a couple of napkins, one hand on her hip as she speaks. But surely they can operate. Can't they just remove the bullet from his neck and sew up the hole? Or send him to one of the bigger, more specialist hospitals if they can't do it here? And for a second, I'm swept away in Eloise's hopefulness and determination. But Theo's face tells another story. Sadly not, he says. Dr. Sim told Bastien that the bullet was wedged between some artery or another, or a triangle of sorts. Said that any sort of surgery would kill him outright on the table, that he'd simply lose too much blood. No chance of the boy living with the bullet in his neck permanently? Asked Dan. You hear about soldiers living with embedded shrapnel all the time, don't you? Or is it too risky for infection or something? Theo gives a little shrug. I don't know all the ins and outs, he says. Only what Dr. Sim asked me to tell Bastien over the phone. But from the way I understood it, the bullet wasn't very stable. Wouldn't take much for it to move and for William to bleed out before anyone could stop it. Just a matter of time now. How awful, says Yvette, placing her hand on Dan's arm and giving him a gentle smile. And I realise, in that very moment, that maybe I've been a little hard on her, that she really is genuine, that she's not the next Sophia, that, like me, she really does have his best interests at heart. I'm sorry, she says. For earlier, I put 2 and 2 together and came up with 10. It was just, you said that that you saw him in the woods, and I thought it must have been the same person. I'm really sorry. Dan gives her a smile. No worries, he says. I can totally see how you'd end up with that conclusion, especially if you've not met Nicholas before. He really is one cool dude, and he'd never kill anyone. Eloise's face lights up as something occurs to her. I can see her detective side coming alive as she starts to piece things together. She says, eyes wide open. This is good. Well, at least for Nicholas. Obviously not for William. But, there's no way Bastien can go after Nicholas now, is there? I mean, we've got William as a witness. He must have seen who shot him. And Yvette, she saw someone in the woods. And then there's the bullet. So all we have to do is prove that the bullet in William's neck is not the same as the one from Nicholas's gun. And then he can't possibly be a suspect. I'm onto something. Tell me I'm right. What is it? Dan says, concern on his face as he pulls my jacket back into position on Yvette's shoulder. Do you know something? Yvette's whole body deflates as she drops her eyes to the ground, letting out a loud sigh. I'm sorry, she says, but I just don't share your optimism, not when the policeman in charge is Bastien. You said it yourself, he's an idiot. Not an idiot exactly, I say. Eloise scoffs at me. Yes, he is, Maddie, he's a total idiot. Okay, well, maybe a bit of an idiot, but mostly just because he sees us as dealing Class A drugs like caffeine, rather than appreciating the fine arts of coffee brewing and cake baking. And, says Eloise, because he's the laziest policeman on the planet. I have to admit that it isn't looking great for Valdezera's chief of police, but I'm trying to channel a bit of Nicholas's Olympic mindset and looking for the silver lining in what is turning out to be a rather grim situation. Sure, I say. There's no denying that either, but he does get the job done eventually. We just need to steer him in the right direction. What makes you have so little faith in Bastien anyway? Dan asks Yvette. Have you even met him? Yvette hesitates awkwardly, unsure perhaps whether to trust these new strangers in her life. She pauses for a moment, slowly working up the courage. Oh, I met him, she says. Last night at our chalet, my father had some ski gear stolen, and we called the police to report the theft, but Bastien was not interested. Said he'd look into it if he got a moment. Said we probably just misplaced it. I really don't think he believed us. Father was furious. What kind of ski gear? Asked Dan. I run the ski shop. I could put a notice up if you like, keep my ears open, in case anyone tries to sell any second-hand ski gear or whatever. I'd really appreciate that, says Yvette. I can see why Yvette lacks faith in Bastien, and I can see why they might be annoyed at his lacklustre attitude, especially if there was no glory in it for him, nothing to make him look good amongst his peers. Well, that does sound like Bastien, I say. Eloise is still plotting something, concocting some sort of a plan. Well, that settles it, she says. Maddie, we simply have to get on the case ourselves. We have to clear Nicholas of the murder, and maybe we can help to track down the ski gear thief whilst we're at it. And we can ask Carl as well, to keep an ear out too. He might hear something, while he's working at the club. You never know.